All right, guys. Welcome into Talkin Dawgs here on YouTube, I guess. I don't have a name for this channel other than my own name, so nothing spectacular there. I appreciate you guys checking in here. If you're subscribed, really appreciate you. If you're not, click that subscribe button. Help me out and get close to 1,000 subscribers. It's been a goal of mine for a while, and I'd really appreciate that. We'll do a lot of these Talking Dog sessions throughout the season. Probably once a week, we'll get on here and do these live chats. I like to get you guys involved, get your thoughts on everything as the season goes on. Questions, concerns, whatever you guys want to talk about. I always like to hear from you guys and get your thoughts on some things as well. So, anytime you guys want to throw a question in there or a comment or whatever you want to do in that chat session over on the right side of the box, feel free to do so. This is open forum. There's nothing real serious about this at all. It's just me talking to you guys. That's what we're going to do. We had Mike Leach's press conference today. As usual, didn't really learn much of anything from that. So, there wasn't a whole lot coming from that. Of course, depth chart came out today. That's another thing I think you take with a grain of salt, but there are some interesting things on there that we can certainly talk about if you guys want to do that. And if you guys want to talk about whatever else, doesn't matter to me. We'll discuss whatever you guys want to. So State and Memphis coming up this Saturday at Davis Wade Stadium. State has a chance to get a little redemption on Memphis after what happened last year at the Liberty Bowl. Mississippi State lost by 2 points in that game. Of course, there was a questionable call in that ball game that a lot of people are talking about. Obviously that helped Memphis win that game, but there was a lot of situations in the game that Mississippi State should have taken care of that they didn't. So, a lot of blame to go around there, but Mississippi State has a chance to get that redemption on Saturday. They need to come out, play really well, and win that ball game to get things started. So, you guys throw some questions in there. We'll start talking. Let's try to temper a little bit of the women's basketball stuff. I want to keep this more centered around football. We'll talk a little bit women's basketball and some stuff, but I'd like to center around women's football a little bit. I'll get the women's basketball out of the way. How are we with Madison Booker? I don't think Madison Booker's coming to Mississippi State. I don't have a clue what you're talking about with Mia Moore. There's really nothing to talk about with that. I don't know what that means. George Brooks on the men's basketball staff. Yes, he is. Do we have a chance with Samaya Nichols? Yes, they have a chance with her. I don't know where they sit right now, so I'm kind of focused on football. Landon, are you shocked at all that Wally's starting, or do you think in the offense that he'll play enough to be satisfied anyway? I think you meant not starting. I don't know who they're going to throw out there first game. That depth chart could have been, Mike Leach just trying to get Jaden Wally's attention. I don't know. I don't know who's going to go out there. I don't think it matters because I think Rufus Harvey and I think Jaden Wally will both be playing a lot of reps in that game. First guy out there, I don't know who that's going to be. It could be either one of those guys, and I think they would be just fine. Rufus Harvey's had a really, really good fall or training camp, whatever you want to say. Brian gets on to me for saying fall camp. I've tried to change a little bit of that, but training camp has been all Rufus Harvey at that position. Jaden's been a little up and down. He's had trouble with some drops in his first 2 years, and he's had a little bit of that too in practices so far as well. But, for the most part, he's still Jaden Wally. He's still one of your most talented receivers. He's a guy that's going to help Mississippi State win ball games this year. He's going to catch a lot of passes. He's going to catch a lot of passes for a lot of yards, and he'll be a guy that has several touchdowns as well. I just think that there's going to be 8 to 10 guys that you can throw out there wide receiver that are going to be really good for Mississippi State this year. I think that they're going to be deeper than last year. I don't know if there's a Mekhi Polk on this roster, a guy that's going to catch 100 passes for over 1,000 yards. I think there's going to be somebody that separates himself as the number one guy, but I don't know if you're going to have that type of production for one receiver. But I do think that Will Rogers could have more yards, more production this year, despite losing a guy that caught 1,000 yards worth of passes. And I think a big part of that is Will relied a lot on Mekhi Polk last year. He was their possession guy outside of Austin Williams. He was a guy that Will Rogers really felt comfortable throwing the ball to on one-on-one situations, that was going to go up and get a pass, that was going to pull one down in the end zone when they're inside the 10-yard line. That was his safety blanket, and that's why he got a lot of the passes last year. That could go around to several other guys this year. Rufus Harvey can come in there and catch a few passes. Tula Griffin can do that. I think Caleb Ducking's going to have a big year. I think Ra Thomas is going to have a big year. Austin Williams is going to do what he does. And then you have the running backs in there as well. There's just so many options out there for Mississippi State. And I really believe that this could be, you look at the stat sheet and you see 10 guys with 25-plus receptions or something. I think this is going to be a big year for Mississippi State's offense because of that. It really just boils down to, can the offensive line just keep Will Rogers in the pocket long enough to find somebody consistently? We've talked about it all offseason. There's not going to be a Charles Cross out there this year. I think they're going to be better at right tackle. I think they're going to be worse at left tackle, but there's really not a whole lot more that you can do to be better at left tackle. So, I think that they're going to be okay on the offensive line. So, with that said, I think the offense is going to be okay. And I think Jaden Walley is going to be okay to round back to your question. Jason, I assume since Leach said we were average when referring to wide receivers, that we have been below average the past 2 seasons. He's a guy that is not going to give a lot of credit. He's not one of those that likes to hype anybody up on his team at these press conferences. He knows what he's doing. I mean, he's a very smart guy. But, I think they're better than average at wide receiver. And I think they've been better than average for the most part. But I do think they're better this year than they have been. And this might be the deepest group that they've had. A really talented group, too. I think that everything's going to come together for this offense. I think they're going to be solid this year. But, yeah, I mean, he's just not going to give a lot of credit out there, which I think should make you feel good about guys like Dollar Bill, who he's talked well about this year. Rufus Harvey, he just goes on and on about him. That should make you feel really good about those kind of guys that he talks really well about. Boy Scout Bob, Winston Academy, stand up. That's right. I'm always trying to rep Winston County in some form or fashion. And I pulled out the WA polo for the press conference today. We had a long day today. We had we went up to the stadium. The media got a chance to see the balconies. Really cool. Really, really cool. If you have a chance to get those balconies at some point, or, even if it's like a single game ticket, I highly recommend that. Great views. Just incredible views there. People talk bad about being in the upper deck at Mississippi State, and, being up there and exposed to the sun and all that stuff. Climbing up there, I could see how that would be kind of annoying. I had season tickets up there one time. I actually really enjoyed the season tickets up there on the east side, because at the time on that east side, they had, the concession stands were indoors. You had, nice bathrooms. The views, I've always enjoyed being above everything to be able to kind of see how plays develop, see who's in the game, and things like that. So being up top has never really bothered me. But being in the balconies, you have more shade than people actually thought that you were going to have. They're going to be mostly shaded in the balconies. And then up top, at the very top, they have the permanent shading up there. And you have refrigerators, you have your seats that you can bring your own seats. You can bring, small fans, I think. It's just a really, really cool idea to be in a place that, a lot of people crap on the idea, but it's a place that was not selling. Mississippi State was having a tougher time selling those seats where the balconies are than anywhere else in the stadium. So not only have they sold out that spot, I mean, anything that they would have done there, tickets wise, would have been better than what they had. So it was really a genius move. I really like it. It's a really cool idea. And also, they've upgraded the video boards. I think you're really going to like the video boards in the stadium. I think you're really going to like the ribbon boards. There's ribbon boards now at every spot of the stadium. And the video boards have a much bigger screen. It's not the panels like they had. It's a much bigger screen. It's got the down and distance. It's got stats. It's got the score up there. And then on the same screen, it's got, the video for what you see on the field. So really good upgrades to the stadium. I think they spent over $10 million just on the video boards and the ribbon boards, and then the project that they have with the balconies. And that's not going to be the end of it. They're going to be making upgrades to that stadium over the next few years that I think fans are really going to like. Dale, will Leach have the challenge flag ready for this game? Yeah, the funny thing is, now I guess you're talking about that Memphis game. He was told that they reviewed that play because they review scoring plays. They wouldn't let him challenge that, which I thought was very strange because they said they just reviewed it, which was an even more egregious error by that crew to not give that a much closer look than they did. They looked at it just briefly. I mean, that was a complete botch of a play. And, the SEC, I think, came out afterwards and said the call was wrong. I mean, it was just a disaster. So, I mean, it's hard to really blame them for that because they told him that they couldn't review it. They just reviewed it. So, and he didn't even know that the ref was signaling that the play was dead. We told him in the post-game presser, he had no idea that the ref had actually signaled the play dead. Just a complete botch job by the entire referee crew there. Ty, what's the deal with Crumity? He's got some kind of wrist injury. Mike Leach is not going to give us any specifics on it. We're just going on what we're hearing from our sources. It's a wrist injury. It's a little bit serious than just a fractured wrist or something like that. There's some issues there. They're hoping to get him back at some point. I'm not really sure what the timetable is for that. I mean, it's just a really weird injury, and we can't get any clarity on it. But I do not expect him to play at least the first two games, and we'll see beyond that. I think State's okay, though, at depth on the defensive line. Mark, what have you seen from the punters? Best I've heard is inconsistent. Some booming punts followed by some shanks. I've been okay with the punting situation. I think they're going to be fine. Archer Trafford is one of those that can really boom them. He had a big booming punt in the scrimmage that I saw the other day. It's hard to really tell because a lot of times some of the punts that they're punting, they're trying to angle them. They're trying to, it's a situational type stuff. So it's hard to really know if they're shanking them or if that's just an angled punt where they're trying to down it inside the 10 or something. So we're going to find out pretty quick. But they have some good competition. George Tjopoulos and Archer Trafford. I think both of those guys are going to be better than serviceable. They're both very talented. I feel like I sneeze every single time on this thing. That's what happens on these live shows. Dirty 808. What a name. Did Will Rogers solidify himself as a top quarterback in the SEC this year? Meaning not just by the numbers. I think people aren't impressed enough with him despite the numbers. That's going to be the real interesting for me. This is like my trial period with how people view Mike Leach in the SEC. I think that people are going to discount what Mississippi State does on offense because of Mike Leach. They're going to look at this offense and they're going to say, well, you're supposed to put up 4,800 yards passing. Your receivers you're supposed to have a 1,000-yard receiver every year. You're supposed to have a quarterback that's closing in on 5,000 yards. I think that's going to be the norm unless Mississippi State has a year like Mike Leach had it at Washington State with Gardner Minshew, and then he kind of takes the world by storm. And that's really, to me, unfair. I think there is some justification in the fact that there's going to be bigger passing numbers with Mike Leach quarterbacks. But I think you have to look at the competition level in the SEC, the fact that defenses are game planning to limit the pass, and Will Rogers is still going to put up some big numbers. I think people need to give him a little more respect. And he doesn't have the ability of a Bryce Young. He's not as naturally gifted as a player like Will Levis or Hooker, but those guys are more naturally gifted. But I think you have to consider the fact that he's got it in between the ears. You know, his completion percentage is so high despite throwing 60-plus passes in the game. He deserves to be considered one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC, in my opinion. He just finished with a top 3, I think, year in a single season of any quarterback in SEC history. And one of the guys that was ahead of him played in 2 more games than he played. So, you know, he's about to pass every single record that Mississippi State has ever had in the passing department, and I think he deserves the credit. I also thought the same thing about Nick Fitzgerald. Nick Fitzgerald was one of the greatest running quarterbacks in SEC history, and he still doesn't get talked about. And despite the fact that there were so many teams in the SEC in the past that ran, you know, some type of veer triple option where it's almost like the opposite of the air raid where you're running the ball almost every single play. And Nick Fitzgerald surpassed everybody in that category. And I think he deserves more recognition than he gets as well. Oh, what do we have? Todd up in the balconies at 3:30 on Saturday, and the shade is already set behind the stadium. Yeah, I'm really interested to see the responses from fans at the game in the balconies. I think it's going to be a popular spot, and I wouldn't be surprised to see more of those. Not only, you know, around the country, because we're already seeing. I think Texas Tech did something similar. I think that's going to be more prominent inside the stadium. I think you might see some more things like that. It's really smart. You make a premium seat in a place that you wouldn't consider premium. So a good way to sell tickets. And Mississippi State right now is trying to improve fan experience over capacity. That was such a big thing, you know, 10 years ago was capacity. Got to get more people in the stands. Well, now you're having trouble getting people to games. So what do? You got to figure out ways to get them there. And that's probably going to be limiting capacity a little bit. When you start taking away some of these spots, they've taken away, I think, 1,000 seats with the balconies. That's okay because those seats were not going to be full anyway. So make it a better atmosphere. I think the next thing that you start to think about, which I think Mississippi State is the other end zone in the South. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Sultan of SWAT, 33, has the announcements of starting quarterbacks for some of our opponents swayed your opinion on how we will do against those teams, like LSU, A&M, and Auburn? I still think State beats A&M and Auburn. I'm not impressed with either one of those teams and really not impressed with their quarterbacks. I think more highly of A&M than I do Auburn, but that game's at home and State's played really well against them. So I think, you know, that is what it is. LSU's interesting to me. I don't know if the quarterback really changes my opinion one way or the other. I think Jaden Daniels is the starter. Is that correct? You know, I've thought about the same with LSU. It's just that game's at Tiger Stadium, and it's always a tough place for Mississippi State to win, no matter who the quarterback is. I still got LSU in that game, but I think that's a winnable game for State. Bob, what kind of crowd do you expect this weekend with the chance of rain? I'm really interested in that. 6:30, not going to be too hot. If it's not, if the rain comes earlier in the day or it holds off for a little bit, I mean, I think it could be a good crowd. I think, 45, 50,000. I think it'll be a solid crowd because I think people are interested in this team and want to see, what they have to offer. I mean, if this team starts 3-0, I think you're going to have, after the Bowling Green game, I guess would be 4-0. Or if they're 3-1 going to that A&M game, I think you could have a really big crowd for that A&M game. I think that's who comes up after Bowling Green. Rhino, what about Emmanuel Forbes? I think he's going to be ready to go. He was, the day after he got hurt in practice, he was back on the field. He didn't take part in team portion of practice, but he was going through drills. If it was something serious, he would have been held out completely. He would have been in the injury pit. He wasn't even in the pit. And he didn't take part in the scrimmage, but that was more precautionary. So I think he's going to be on the field. I'm not worried about him at all. Dale, I heard a lot of optimism on the defensive line. Can we feel good there, even though they've only went against our own offensive line until now? Yeah, I think this defensive line is going to be outstanding. I don't have any concerns about the defensive line at all. Took a little bit of a hit with Jaden Crumity. He's one of the best defensive linemen on the team, but I just feel so good about the depth there. They're going to have Randy Charlton, who started all year last year on the defensive line. Nathan Pickering, who's played a lot the last couple of years. I'm not worried about the line as a whole. I'm not worried about that position. You'd be a lot better off with Jaden Crumity, but I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to have a really big year. That's a unit that I've predicted will be one of the better defensive line units in the SEC by the middle of the season. Boy Scout Bob, what is Hell State Plus? Hell State Plus is a subscription put out by – there's a company that's kind of in conjunction with Mississippi State, but it's not like fully Mississippi State. It's a company working with Mississippi State to put out content that's behind a paywall. So they're going to have I've talked to several people that have been hired to help with that. They're going to have film sessions with coaches and players. They're going to have behind-the-scenes stuff like, the players, like if the players go bowling or something, they might have a behind-the-scenes like deal where they follow Will Rogers and his offensive line going bowling or something like that. And just things like that, premium type content that they don't want to put out, to the general public. They can actually make some money off of it. And I'm not sure the whole, like, where's the money going kind of thing, but I just know that there's a company separate from Mississippi State working with Mississippi State to put it on, and you'll see some good stuff coming from that. And that I think those film sessions, things like that, I think that'd be fun to follow. I think it's like $8 a month for it. So, we'll see how that goes, but it seems like a really good idea. Jay in Baltimore, was there a decision on Don't Stop Believing? We're going to find out on Saturday. I predict that they will have not changed the song. That's just my opinion. I don't think they're going to change it, at least not right now. Bob, what's the next renovation to the stadium? Next big project I would anticipate would be at some point the south end zone. They're going to do some little things. I think you'll see something next year similar to the balconies. I think eventually you'll see LED lights, new speaker system, things like that, cleaning things up around the stadium. But the next big project, I think, is going to be the south end zone. Adam, not a fan of the shirt. That's okay. That's okay. What state's ranking if they start 5-0? You would have beaten LSU and A&M at that point. I think you're inside the top 15. I think if you start off 3-0, you're inside the top 20. I think they're not far off from the top 25. They're one of the teams receiving votes, but it's one of those deals kind of like, and I'm not comparing this team to the 2014 team, but that team started off outside of the top 25. They beat LSU after they started 3-0 or whatever it was, and people started to believe that they were for real. And that's kind of going to be the case this time. You go to Arizona, you beat Memphis, you go to Arizona and beat Arizona on the road. Then you go to LSU and beat LSU. If you do that, people are going to start to believe this team's for real. And then beat Bowling Green will be 4-0, beat A&M probably inside the top 15 at that point, and you could be a team that makes another big jump like they did in 2014. It's going to be tough. This schedule's really tough, but I think this team is capable of winning games like that. Jay, rain scares me with this offense. Yeah, it's not an offense that you won't bog down by the rain. It definitely didn't help them at all against Ole Miss. I think I remember last year going to that Memphis game, there was some concern that it was going to rain. I don't think it ever rained at the game. I can't remember. I don't think it rained. It rained before the game, but never really rained after during the game. And there was some concern going in. So you don't want it to rain. You want it to be a dry field, and we'll see what happens. Sultan of Swat, aside from the state game this weekend, is there a game you've got your eye on? Well, there's a couple of games, right? They got Oregon, Georgia, which should be really fun, and Ohio State, Notre Dame, which seem to be the big games the weekend. FSU and LSU is an interesting game. Two national brands. I'm not sure how exciting that game's going to be, but I would probably watch it anyway. Rhino, a guy I know on the offensive line, was raving about the defensive line, especially Cam Young. Yes, I think they're going to be really good. Cam Young is a sleeper in the SEC. Nobody's really talking about that guy, but he's just been so good since he got his chance a couple of years ago, and I think he's an NFL guy. I really liked that kid in high school, and now I can't say enough good things about him. I thought that was a good get for Mississippi State. He actually signed with Gulf Coast on signing day, and State gave him an offer, and he took that scholarship. He was going to go to Gulf Coast, decided to come to Mississippi State, and it's really paid off. Another success story. I think him and Cam Jones both had the same exact thing happen on signing day. They both have turned out to be really good players. I think Cam Jones is going to be an NFL guy too. Dirty, do we have any pass rush talent this year? Yeah, you got Jordan Davis is back. Didn't play last year. Was going to be, I think, was going to have a huge year last year towards ACL. I think he's going to be pretty good. DeMonte Russell made a big jump. I think both of those guys are going to help you this year. And then you got some linebackers that I think can come in there and get some pass rush as well. I think they're going to show a lot more pass rush this year than they did a year ago. This should be a much improved pass rushing team, and I think that's going to make the whole defense better. Scott, what's up, Scott, fellow Winston Countyan? How much of the capacity will decrease with the lofts added to the stadium? I really like Cohen trying to change it up to get people in. Yeah, it's going to be a little over 1,000, I think. 60,000 something is now the current capacity. It was 61. It's, I think, a little over 1,000, which is fine. I don't remember the last time State had 60,000 in the stadium. So, and I think it's going to continue to decrease. I think this could get down to 55,000 again at some point. Which I'm what happens if they bowl in the end zone? It's kind of one of those deals like, do you want to increase capacity? Or not. I mean, I think you could decrease capacity maybe by bowling in the end zone by adding more of those lounge type balconies throughout the stadium or something like that, But I think they got to do something in the south end zone at some point. They got to fix that. It's just not, it looked good back in the day, but now, and I will say the M Club building was painted to match the video board, and it looks really good. It's it looks really good right now. But at some point, you've got to do something about that. The aesthetics there, what are you going to do with those end zone? Because I don't think those trailer things are gonna work long term. Elvis, what's up? How difficult will it be for Albert Reese to back up at tackle and guard? They've been pretty good about preparing players to play different positions to where it's just not that difficult. Cam Jones has done that a lot. I like Cam Jones better at guard, but if he's your best tackle, you got to put him there. If he's your best option at right tackle, I think Reese is your future at right tackle. But right now, he's just not ready. And I think Cole Smith and Cam Jones are both ahead of him because they've been in this system for a while and they played college football for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's just one of those deals. I don't think that this has been a situation where Reese has just declined. I think it's been Cole Smith has just gotten better and gotten healthy, and he's back in the mix. He's reclaimed the job that was his. But I think he's going to be fine, Albert Reese. Bob, Josh Pate mentioned that if MSU this year was wearing LSU jerseys, they would be looked at completely different. He said that if MSU wins 8 games with the schedule they're playing, like a top 15. Yeah, I agree. If this team wasn't Mississippi State, if you looked at it and said Mississippi State is returning X starters, this is how many yards they put up, this is how many catches they had, this is how many tackles they had. They got you talk to scouts, they have this many guys that the NFL teams are slobbering over right now. Then people will be talking about this team competing for an SEC West championship. That's unfortunate that it's looked at that way, but that's the perception. And this team could be really dangerous. And I know Josh is one of the main regional national guys that has been high on Mississippi State. And I continue to be high on them too. I think I predicted 7 wins, but I think 8 is very attainable. I think 9 is possible. I think this team is capable of doing big things. The schedule is just such a tough schedule like it is every year, but this is particularly tough. There's only one game in between games that is kind of a filler. There's no 2 or 3 week build up to something else. It's going to be tough, but I think this team is perfectly capable of ruining some seasons for teams and also getting some big upsets. I think this team could have a big year. Rhino, will DWS become left field lounge? Yeah, there's a few concepts similar to that, but I like some of these ideas. I really like the balconies. I think people should experience those. Scott, with the Big Ten deal with CBS, is it done now, or is there a contract that they have to finish with the 2:30 games? Is it starting? That's not starting this year, is it? I think they got a couple years left on that. But that contract was huge that the Big Ten signed, which they signed with, I think, 2 different spots. It's like $1 billion or something. Just a huge contract on that. Adam, if State averages 425 yards and 32 points a game, what is your record for the year? 8 or 9 wins at least. If you're putting up 425 yards and you got 32 points, 32 points would be better than they've had the last couple of years. They should win 8 or 9 games if they're doing that. Sultan, which is more likely, Rodgers throws for 5,500 yards or the running back room runs for 1,200? It's a good question. I would say 1,200 yards would be more likely. That's what they had. They have 1,000 yards last year rushing. We're talking about 300 yards, maybe tops, more than they had last year. I think that's more attainable than 5,500. 5,500 is a big, big number. That's a more than 700 yard difference for Will Rogers than he had last year. That's pretty big, unless he made the playoffs. Dirty, are we beating T-Sun this year? Media loves that team for some reason. I think it's possible. They really need to. you can't have 3 straight years of losing to your rival like that. You got to win this game. You've had 2 bad seasons against Ole Miss, and I don't think people are going to continue to be excited about this program and want to move forward if you're not winning that game. You can't let Ole Miss own this rivalry. So this is a big year for them. They need to win this game, and that could be the difference in 8 or 9 wins. Chris, how big of a gap do you think there is between Rogers and Robertson? Right now, pretty big gap. From a talent perspective, Sawyer Robertson's more talented athletically, but it looks like 2 different quarterbacks when they're out there in scrimmages. Rogers just had so much command over this offense, of that locker room. The leadership thing is a big deal. The leadership thing, and having the confidence to run out there and run this offense. But I think Sawyer took a big step. You're starting to see some flashes when you watch him in practice. You see a pass that you start to say, okay, this kid's got some juice on him. And then you'll see him throw it to the other team, and you wonder, where he was throwing it. And that's just going to come with reps. I mean, he's just got to get more reps, and I think he's going to be fine. I mean, hopefully he sticks around and you bring him in there possibly as a junior or whatever. And if he sticks around, he's a junior and he comes in there in his 4th year and has a lot of confidence coming in there as a starter. I mean, you're setting yourself up for some good years ahead. The big key is going to be keeping him happy if he's not able to win that job next year, because I feel certain that he'll probably stick it out this year and then come into that next season trying to win that job from Will Rogers. Will he be willing to sit for 3 years? That's the big question, because in 2022, that's just not that's not something to expect from guys. But Sawyer is one of those that I really want to see develop at Mississippi State and get into that starting spot. And we'll see if he does that. But you certainly see some flashes from him. And I think Rodgers is ahead right now, but he made up some ground in the offseason just by getting more reps. But there's still a pretty sizable gap. Elvis, how close are Rabin and Biscardi running to be field goal kicker? I think both of them will play. I think they're going to do a lot of those situational kicking like they've done before. I could see Rabin kicking the longer field goals and Biscardi coming out there and kicking the ones that are average distance. I think Biscardi is probably more accurate. I thought Biscardi was better in training camp, but I think both of them will play. I think the same thing's going to happen with the punters. Bob, is Sawyer Robertson ready just in case? I wouldn't feel comfortable throwing him out there, but we weren't comfortable seeing Dak Prescott out there in 2013. So you don't really know if those guys are ready until they get in the ballgame. I would like to see him get some reps this year, though. I would like, last year there were several times where I thought State should have thrown in Sawyer or Chance Lovertich or whoever was going to be the backup and let them get some reps, because I think it's big to get those real game reps, get in the ball game, get the jitters out, and realize, okay, that's my first game. I think Sawyer needs a few of those games this year. And hopefully they can come out against Memphis and just beat Memphis into the ground and get Sawyer like a second half. That would be great. You got to let him experience it, because he's one play away from getting in the ball game. So, we'll see what happens this year, but I think you got to get him some experience this year. Also, will special teams be improved with having one coach just focus on special teams rather than focus on multiple positions? I would think so. I mean, I think that was an issue for them. You really want to have your special teams coach locked in on special teams. I feel like those are the best special teams, the ones that have the one coach that's just focused on that. And, I thought State was better in 2020. I thought they took a step back in 2021. And, we'll see if Mealy comes out there and has an improved unit this year. I mean, there's a lot of special teams plays last year that hurt them. So they definitely need to be better. Todd, Robbie, what do you see Xavier Thomas playing in this year? That was one thing I was trying to get out of Leach today. I really wanted to know if there was anybody that was going to be like Ra Thomas this year that could get in there and make a difference as a true freshman. I think of the true freshman wide receivers, he would be my pick. The guy that would play. He really showed off on some plays this year during camp. You know, there's going to be some inconsistencies with guys like that in their first year, but he definitely has the ability. He can fly. He can get separation from defenders. He can catch the ball. I feel like that was a big steal for Mississippi State getting him to campus. And I love Louisiana players. I think that's one of the most talented states in America. Unfortunately, you have to deal with LSU in every instance with a Louisiana kid. I tweeted about it the other day. I was thinking about some of these kids in the past that have come through that Mississippi State almost landed. Malik Neighbors. The kid was getting ready to sign his letter of intent with Mississippi State, and LSU calls him at the last second and offers him a scholarship. Lloyd Cushenberry, who ended up going to the NFL. Same deal. It's happened time and time again, but those are the kind of guys that you have to recruit. The guys that LSU has scouted, they're on their list, but they're behind some guys. That was the case with Xavier Thomas. They liked him, but they have, LSU has 6 wide receivers ahead of some of these guys. Malik Neighbors was a backup plan. He's their best receiver right now in camp. So that's what you have to deal with LSU. And I think if you get them to school, the Cam Dantzlers, the Xavier Thomases, the Dak Prescotts, if you get them to Mississippi State, they're going to do something at Mississippi State. I think you're going to see a great career from Xavier Thomas. Whether it's this year, I don't know, but I think he's going to be really good, especially in this offense. And I like what Mississippi State has done with this wide receiver group and this class that's currently going on in the last class. You're seeing some big, tall, physical receivers. Justin Robinson they brought in the transfer portal. Nakai Poole that they're bringing in the next class. Justin Brown that they're bringing in. But you're also seeing this speed that they're adding. Marquez Dortch, Xavier Thomas. Those guys have game-breaking speed. And I think that's going to give you these big plays that you're looking for. So I like Xavier Thomas. I think he's going to be big time for Mississippi State. Jason, you have me really excited to see what this team can do. I think that the potential is there, Jason. I think this team has a chance to be really good. I continue to talk about that schedule. It's always going to be tough, but I really believe that with the experience that they have, they're going to be in these ball games against great teams. I don't know if they're going to have a chance to beat Alabama, but I think it would not shock me to see them in a game with Georgia at home. And the difference between last year and this year is these guys are a year older. These guys are learning how to win ball games. These guys are going to win those ball games this year, I think, when it comes down to it. It's just you got to start off strong. You can't have these bad first quarters like they had last year against La Tech, LSU, Memphis. It cost them several of their games. They had a bad start against Arkansas. And I know they got back in the ball game. I think they got the lead in that game. But, you had a bad start in that game. You missed field goals in that game. Just about every game that they lost, it was self-inflicted, with the exception of probably Alabama. I think just about every single game at Texas Tech, which they played terribly, but I want to give credit to Tech as well. State's got to start strong, and you can't have these games that is the Mike Leach go-to, where he's going to beat a team he's not supposed to beat, and he's going to lose a team he's not supposed to. They need to beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They have to beat those teams. And then they need to win these toss-up games, these games that I'm predicting them to win, A&M, Arkansas, Auburn. Those have to be wins. I'm predicting those games to be wins, but they have to be wins. And then, we'll see what happens with the Georgias and the LSUs of the schedule and the Ole Misses and the Kentuckys. So it should be a fun year. I think this team's going to be good. Elvis, I know Austin's sure-handed, but do we not care about a punt return threat? That's a good question, and he's muffed a punt or two, so um, he's not. It's not like you're gonna 100% gonna catch the ball back there. I've always liked to have a good threat back there, but you have to make sure that you catch that ball. Jaden Wally's a better returner, but he's muffed a couple of punts. Had a big muff punt against Arkansas a couple years ago. I would like to see somebody back there that could take it to the house. But with punters these days, it's so difficult most of the time to get a return. So I can see their line of thinking there is they're probably not going to return it anyway. So get a guy that's going to make the good decision, that's going to let it hit in the end zone, or he's going to come up and fair catch it. I can see that. I don't know if Austin would be my punt return guy, but I can see their line of thinking there. It makes sense. Anybody else? Had a good chat as always. I'm really glad to get these things going again. I want to do these things every week. I enjoy doing this. And summer was giving me some withdrawals. I had a couple of these that we did during the summer, but just not a whole lot going on to do these. So I'm glad we're getting back into it. We'll try to do these probably every Monday. So, but like I said, not much learned from Mike Leach today at his press conference. We saw Rufus Harvey listed on the depth chart, first team. I'm trying to think. Jackie Matthews is first team safety. Not a big surprise, but interesting to see them go through with that. I think he's one of the most talented safeties out there. So, that's not a big surprise. I think he's going to be really good for state of the secondary, a group we hadn't talked about that I think is going to be improved. So, all right, guys. Thank you guys for being on here with me again. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already. Subscribe to 247 if you aren't already. I appreciate you guys. We appreciate state fans supporting us. As always, this is always a fun experience too on here. So you guys have any questions, comment on this video. I'll get back with you after it's uploaded and all that stuff. And we'll be sure to talk next week as well. You guys have a great rest of the week. We'll see you at Davis Wade Stadium on Saturday. Should be a fun season. Should be a fun game on Saturday. And we will see you then. You guys have a great week.